Well, this is, if you don't know already, wait a minute, where's Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right, there you go. If you don't know already, this is the Podcast Engineering Show, and this is session
20.
If I have my number straight, go. Oh, yes. The beginning of a show is a great time to clear your throat. Welcome, everybody. Wow, we're back here. We're back on a Monday morning. 7:30 a.m. my time. Have you podcasted early in the morning? That's a good question. Max, what's the earliest show recording you've ever done?
Oh, probably about 11 in the morning.
I know. All right, so Max is East Coast, and it's 9:30 in the morning there, and that's early too. Anyway, I don't know why just podcasting early doesn't. Some people.
The voice just
weird.
isn't really energized yet.
Totally. So, welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Chris Curran. I'm your host, and I'm the founder of the Podcast Engineering School, which is having its first course this fall, actually. So, this is the Podcast Engineering Show. Every week, we bring you podcast production techniques, and we talk to experts, and we really talk shop about podcasting. We don't get into the marketing. We don't talk about how to get listeners. We don't talk about how to make a website. Nothing. It's the audio engineering side of podcasting. So I love podcasting. I've been involved for about 4 years. Right now I produce podcasts for Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet, as well as a bunch of really awesome business authors. And when I entered podcasting about 4 years ago, I realized that the audio engineering skills of most podcasters is pretty much non-existent. You can fly by the seat of your pants, you can get by, but, there's a difference between the master violinist, let's say, and the guy who just picked it up 3 months ago. I mean, they can both play Happy Birthday on the violin, but it sounds way different. So that's how it is with audio engineering. When you learn these skills, these fundamentals, when you really start to understand and get your ears tuned, you become a master and you have an unfair advantage. That's the whole idea of this show. Also, this show is sponsored by my production company, Fractal Recording, producing podcasts of the highest caliber. And, of course, the Podcast Engineering School. You can listen and subscribe anywhere you hear a podcast. Of course, you know that. iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and any app, right? I use, actually, Podcast Addict on my Android. Max, what do you use?
I generally use Pocket Casts because I have Android, I have iOS, and it syncs across all those, and I really, really like that. So I've been really pleased with Pocket Casts.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, there's a lot of different apps that are cool for your whichever one you like. I think Overcast is a big one for iOS. I don't think...
Yes.
Yeah, Overcast, I don't think they have an Android, which I would have liked to try it because Daniel J. Lewis a few episodes ago mentioned how you can... There's some cool features to Overcast. Anyhow, that's on the listening side. We're here to talk about the production side, and I'm already talking to my guest. Is it rude to ask your guest questions before introducing him? I don't know. I like doing that. That's like an informal way for me to start the show. Our guest today is Max Flight. He hosts and produces Airplane Geeks Podcast. That's right, the Airplane Geeks Podcast. He also does two others. One is called the UAV Digest. The other one is the PAX X Podcast, which is a hyper niche show. Max, first of all, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show.
Chris, it's so nice to be speaking with you, but I'm especially grateful for your work to bring the podcast engineering side of this thing to all the podcasters. That's a real area that's not been covered real well, I think.
And I get a lot of emails from people that are like, oh my God, I love your show. I mean, I won't say I get a lot. I get a substantial amount, though. And it's like I've been doing the Mystic Show for almost 3 years now, which is a show I do about spirituality and mindfulness. And now I get emails like that for the Mystic Show. But right off the bat, this Podcast Engineering Show gets great response, and it's definitely a very niche focus. And you wrote me an email, and the subject of the email, I have to tell people, was "Damn you, Dave Jackson."
Yeah, that's right. That's where I first heard about you, was on Dave Jackson's show. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, don't tell Dave, but I put his show on pause, and I immediately went over to your website and listened to you, and then later came back and finished with Dave.
Well, of course, Dave, in my opinion, is one of the four faces on the Mount Rushmore of podcasting. So Dave Jackson is like, we all bow to Dave Jackson. And it's funny, he's making these Facebook Live videos in the last few weeks or month that are pretty cool. I don't know. Dave's a cool guy. I really like Dave.
He is. Plus, he's got an amazing sense of humor, which makes his shows really, really interesting.
And he plays guitar, and we were talking about jamming and stuff, but, we don't know how to coordinate that. We need that, what I told you about before the show, that bot that actually schedules time between two people's calendars automatically. So let's get into this, Max. Where are you, by the way?
In Connecticut, right near Hartford, Connecticut.
All right, Connecticut, and your Airplane Geeks podcast. By the way, what's the website for that?
airplanegeeks.com.
All right, that's easy enough. And the show is obviously about flying. By the way, is Max Flight your real name?
Sure, yeah. It's all about aviation. Our audience is primarily aviation professionals and serious enthusiasts. So we have a lot of folks who are pilots, a lot of folks listen who are in the aviation industry in different capacities. So it's a great group. Really, they're so engaged in this, and we have such a great interaction with our audience. We just love it.
That's awesome. Have you ever recorded a podcast in an airplane?
No, but we are negotiating with a major international airline to do that, and it may happen. That may be in our future.
Really? Hey, I have a question for Barry. Barry's the maintenance guy here in the studio, in the building here. Barry, what is someone going to need to actually record a podcast in an airplane?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Okay. There you go.
And, oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I have other Barry clips. You want to break? Let's break out another Barry clip. Barry, did you see... Barry, do you think after all these years, Max is just going to, up and quit his show and stop doing his show?
Nah, it ain't going to happen.
There you go. All right.
After 400 and a few episodes, the next target is 500. So,
and how about this, Barry? Max has done almost 500 episodes, and it's all about aviation, but he's never recorded in an airplane. What about that?
That's a mystery.
I love Barry.
So, Max, we are going to get into this. You actually produce Airplane Geeks from start to finish, and we're going to go through that. But let's start with the speed round like we always do, which the speed round has sort of, I don't know what it's become. In fact, I was listening to the Drew Smith episode with my wife, and I started asking him, and she's like, what about the speed round? And I'm like, no, I'm asking him the question for the speed round. Anyway, so, by the way, for your other two shows, UAV Digest and the PAX X podcast, do you produce both of those from start to finish?
The UAV Digest from start to finish, yes. The PAX X podcast, I am just a co-host. I say just. I'm a co-host,
right,
and I do the editing. And then I ship that off, the final MP3 file to the producer, and the rest of the process is handled from that point on.
Interesting. So we're going to talk editing. I want to know your editing philosophy and stuff. But let's, by the way, Airplane Geeks and the UAV Digest, you produce them both the same way? Same setup and everything?
Yep,
okay.
Exactly.
So let's walk us through that. I'm talking to my wife now. Dear, we're starting the speed round right now. Okay. So tell us from start to finish, overview of how you produce the show.
All right. Well, the co-hosts and guests are all on Skype. I pass everything through a mixer running Mix Minus. I have 2 PCs. I am a big backup kind of a guy. Always have a backup. So I record with the digital audio recorder and a backup in software. But I also have the co-hosts record themselves locally. So I'm basically doing multi-enders because I really like to end up with each person on their own track when it comes to editing. For that editing, I use Audacity, but also Hindenburg Journalist Pro, which I'm really enjoying.
Hindenburg Journalist Pro.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm going to have to ask you about that. All right, so then you edit it down, and then do you master it at all? Is there a mastering step in there?
Yeah, I really use the Hindenburg for mastering. Sometimes I'll do all the editing in Hindenburg, but most typically I'll do the editing in Audacity, but in either case, the mastering is done in Hindenburg Journalist, which has some really, really interesting and different kinds of features. It's really a different DAW than most of the others.
That's great. We're going to talk about that for sure. So do you have a studio in your house?
If you consider this storage room that I'm standing in to be a studio, yes.
Of course.
It's I use dynamic mics, but I've got so much junk in this room that I'm surrounded by that I'm kind of thinking about maybe trying a condenser mic because it's a fairly dead, acoustically room. But I've got my desk is actually an ironing board, believe it or not. Some people spend all this money on these desks that go up and down. Guess what? You've already got one. It's called an ironing board.
Oh, that is tremendous.
So I've got all the PCs, the mixer on the ironing board. I do have a stack of boxes behind it that's got another secondary monitor.
Oh,
it's. People ask me, say, "Can I see a photo of your studio?" The answer is no.
Really? Oh, I was just going to ask you.
I'm not going to show it because it's a mess. It's a wreck. It's not a wreck, but it just doesn't look like a real proper studio, but it's really, really effective for me.
There you go. See, your studio, well, if you're a man, it's almost like your man cave. So it can be messy and crazy. So, yeah. So if you feel inspired, send me a photo. All right, maybe not. All right, so it's a storage room. That's a studio, by the way. Like anywhere you set up equipment and have a setup, that's a studio. I mean, whether it's loud or not, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I mean, because we're not talking like, old school, 70s and 80s where it's a studio with these, double and triple walls and all this soundproofing. And, we're not talking about that. This is podcasting. No one has that. Although one of my Forbes hosts, or one of the Forbes hosts, not my hosts, she sometimes records in the Sirius satellite radio studios.
Nice.
I think she knows someone over there, or she's been a guest over there, or something. So sometimes she'll send me a recording, which is like, broadcast quality, compressed like you wouldn't believe. I mean, just destroyed with compression and limiting, and it's like, well. You gotta, her other shows are just her on a Blue Yeti, and then this one is like broadcast smashed to death. It's interesting, the difference. So, anywho, let's go through. So, let's talk about microphones because you just said you might want to get a condenser because the room's a little dead, right?
Well, I guess what I mean is because it's so dead, a condenser might be an option. As you well know, a lot of podcasters need to stick with a dynamic mic just because of the sound level that in their recording space wouldn't really allow a condenser mic to be used because of its sensitivity. But I think condensers, for many people, and most condensers, a good mic will sound, it has a different sound than a dynamic mic, than a broadcast mic. And I kind of like that, so I'm thinking about experimenting a little with that.
Yeah, it's not easy, though, I'll tell you that, because the condensers, they are much more precise and clear, like clear, crystal clear almost is a good way to describe it compared to a dynamic. But they do pick up a lot of noise. That's the problem.
Right.
I mean...
Well, and another aspect of that might be that if I sound a whole lot different than my co-hosts, the balance might be off. It might, if I sound better, if I sound too much better than them, it may not really be effective for the listener. Do you know what I mean?
I do. That's a concern I've heard before. And my wife asked me because I just upgraded my microphone to an RE20. And nice. I have, a Neve Portico 2 for my mic pre and compressor and EQ, which is a bad boy. I mean, it's a $3,500 mic pre compressor and EQ. So between that and RE20, I'm rocking a pretty good sound. And my wife was like, well, do you think you might sound too good for your, compared to your co-hosts and guests? Here's my thing. I think it has mostly to do with frequencies. So sometimes people will get on Skype with a headset or something, and it'll be very mid-rangey. And there'll be not much low end or not much high end, and it's just mid-rangey. And the same thing goes with someone on the phone. If you have a hybrid box or if you take phone calls, you can take phone calls through Skype too. But the phone calls are also very mid-rangey. So if you have this big, awesome, bad boy microphone and the other person is like mid-rangey and kind of like whatever, then there's going to be a difference. But if the other person has a decent microphone, like even just a regular dynamic podcasting microphone that's, full frequency, low end, mid, and high end, you'll definitely sound better, but the listener's not going to really even know. I mean, obviously you have to balance make them the same loudness and all that, so they're balanced.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, speaking of compression, since I'm also recording this, I'm watching the waveform of your speech go by. And this cast system that you're using for recording has much less compression than Skype. I can see that in the waveform.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons when I started using Cast, I actually contacted the guy who owns it, the guy who literally created it. Because as an audio engineer, I want to know what's going on. I want to know how it compares to Skype and all this, compression and limiting and ducking the ducking that Skype does.
Yes.
And I talked to him.
Ducking is weird.
Oh, it's rough. As an audio engineer, it's really rough. Like, I can't stand it. People talking and like their words go away, and it's like, well, where is what they said? No, it's gone. It's just.
Well, that's also a reason why I like to do multi-enders, because I'll often have 3 or 4 even co-hosts in addition to the guest. And so because there's so many people online, they're going to talk over themselves from time to time. And then if I have them each on their own track from their own recordings, that lets me manage the ducking and the overlays, and I can just produce an end result that I think sounds more natural and is a better recording in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And not that this is I think Cast should sponsor the show, by the way. But one thing Cast does is it does that multi-ender recording without people even knowing it. So non-technical people who just have a headset, they're a guest, they're just coming on one time, they can connect through Cast, and it actually records them locally and uploads it in the background as they're talking. It's pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
So what kind of mic are you using right now?
This is a Heil PR40. I got this about 7 years ago, and it's sort of my go-to studio mic. I do have some others. I've got a couple of Sennheiser E835s. I got an Audio-Technica 2100 just because I had to find out what everybody was so excited about.
Right.
I also use a Sennheiser MD46 interview mic when I'm out recording at events. I really am growing very fond of that mic.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about that mic, but first of all, the AT2100 that everyone raves about in podcasting, what were your thoughts on it after hearing it?
Almost the same sound as a mic like the Heil. Build quality, not there. I've run across a couple of people that have had some problems with them, with them breaking. So my recommendation would be if it's a mission critical mic for you, I would suggest having a backup, just in case something goes wrong with it.
Interesting. Yeah, I do not own one of those either, but one of my clients here in Colorado Springs who I helped set up their podcast studio, they had one. And between seeing it, you're right. It's a cheaper microphone, build quality, but not bad, but just a little on the cheaper side, right? And the sound is very good, but the PR40 definitely sounds better. I like the way your voice sounds. It has a lot of low end, and that's, the low end with podcasters' voices is always an issue with these bigger mics. Like I'm using the RE20, like I said, and I know I cut down my low end more than you've cut down your low end.
Right.
Because I'm still experimenting with this mic. In fact, I'm to the point now where, like, I might as well just tell the story now. So when I got my RE20, I needed to change my EQ and compression and everything, right? Because it's a new mic. It works with my voice differently. So what I did is I recorded my voice flat through the RE20. Then I replayed the recording of that, the flat recording with no EQ, no compression, no nothing. Hold on.
There's no activity, no giggle, no nothing.
Yeah, there was no activity, no giggle, no nothing on it. And I ran it through my Neve Portico 2, and I just could sit there and mess with the EQ and compressor, while wearing headphones and listening to, so I could actually spend time EQing it and compressing it when I'm not speaking. A lot of people try to do that when they're talking. They'll talk and they'll try to twist knobs while they're talking, and their headphones are cranked up high so they can hear the difference. That's one way I don't like that. It's hard to talk and hear at the same time. So anyway, I got my EQ and compressor settings, and then I went over to my mixing desk and I listened to it through the speakers, and then I would walk back and forth and tweak knobs, and I got something that I kind of liked. But as the days go by, I'll record a session and I'll go over in my mixing desk and I'll be listening through the speakers and I'll be like, yeah, there's a little too much high end. And then, so I'll just walk over without even hearing anything or anything. I'll just walk over to the EQ and just turn the high end down a touch, just a little bit. And I think I've done 5 or 6 little tweaks like that without even hearing what I'm doing. Wow. But it's sort of like I know what I'm doing, right? Because I already went through that whole process of EQing and finding the frequencies.
The Hindenburg Journalist program actually can do something like that with equalization. It has a feature called a voice profiler. And basically what you do is you give it what you consider to be a good recording or the perfect recording or how you want it to sound, and then run the voice profiler, and then it creates, I don't know what, some kind of file or record of that.
Right.
Subsequently, when you have a track, you can apply that voice profiler to that track, and then it does the EQ, whatever's necessary to bring that track to its, to the standard that you've established. And so I have profiles, obviously for myself, but also each of my co-hosts. So if their mic technique is off and they're not standing as close to the mic or speaking as close to the mic as they did last time, or if they have a cold or something, so their voice is a little bit different, it brings it back to that that standard. A really interesting kind of feature.
That sounds awesome, because a lot of times people with even headsets, like you said, mic technique, definitely. Some people, some days they're just a little to the side of the mic for some reason. But also people wear headsets. I have a client who wears a headset and puts the little mic on, the arm comes off the headset and the mic is right near his mouth. I mean, if he moves that a half an inch up or down, it changes the sound a lot.
Sure.
So this voice profiler would tweak it right into where it should be. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So now I want to ask you about the Sennheiser MD46, your interview mic. What kind of mic is that?
So it's dynamic mic. I think I got it new for around $200. It's kind of the one of the standard mics I guess you'll see on news reporting on television or whatever. But at events, what I'll do is I'll connect it to my little digital audio recorder. And if I'm walking around talking to people, even in noisy environments, it really, I don't know, it has a clarity to it. Before I got that mic, I used to use, an E835, or I think I've probably even used the ATR 2100 in those kinds of noisy, live environments. And this Sennheiser, I don't know, the voices just kind of cut through it more. I mean, you still, of course, get the ambient noise that places you at the location at the event. But I don't know, I just think the voices come through with much more clarity.
Right? That's interesting. I just looked it up. I was wondering if it was a hypercardioid. Maybe the pattern was more narrow, but it is just a cardioid polar pattern.
Yeah.
But that's cool. Yeah, right? They make different mics differently. I mean, you heard the episode with Steve Savanu from Audio Technica talking all about mics and how they actually do it. That's pretty cool. So then, what kind of mics do your co-hosts have?
It's a mix. Several have the ATR 2100. One has actually that same Sennheiser E835. So that's kind of generally what they're using. Sort of, kind of $100 dynamic mics.
Right, which for podcasting are just fine.
I do have one co-host that's got a blue mic. It's a condenser. I don't know if it's a Bluebird or something like that. His voice sounds terrific on that mic. It's just really very, very nice. The downside is, of course, we're talking about condenser and the noise. So every August we have the same problem. He's in Chicago, and every August the cicadas come out in Chicago.
Oh.
And his record, the office where he records is not very isolated from the trees and woods around it. So we always have this cicada noise. I don't know. I try to deal with it. I have discovered that most cicada sounds are right around 5,000 hertz. So sometimes I'll use a notch filter to kind of knock that down. But I think our audience has come to sort of expect, if it's August, we're going to hear cicadas.
Nice. Do the cicadas have their own voice profile in Hindenburg?
I should try that. Yeah.
Can you phase it out? Like, get the profile, then flip the phase and get rid of it? Anyway. Phase. See, there's something we haven't talked about on this show yet, phase, but really it doesn't apply to podcasting very much.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because when I'm looking at the waveform, let's say in Audacity, most of the time it's centered, above and below the zero line, but
right.
Sometimes for some recording, some people, it's all up on one side or down on the other side. Is that a phase issue? I don't know. I've always wondered about why that is.
I actually don't know. I've recognized that as well. Some people, the majority of their signal is above the zero line.
Yeah.
Or not the majority. It's like shifted a little up above the zero line, or some people's is shifted down. I first thought maybe it's because some people have a negative attitude and some people have a positive attitude. Of course. Okay. But no, it I don't know if it's phase. There's something else in digital audio recorders called DC offset, which I'm not sure what that is either. So now I don't know is my answer. And that's one great thing about this show is if I don't know, I say I don't know. I don't make stuff up. I'm not like that. I will look into that. I'll find out about the phase and the DC offset and the wave being more on one side or the other.
Yeah, I'd be interested in learning more about that. Yeah.
So in your setup, you have your mic, you have your PR40, it sounds really good, man. PR40s are great. I wish I had one to try. I'm just not going to buy one just to try it because they're not cheap.
No.
Who knows? Maybe at Podcast Movement somebody will have one, and maybe I'll bring my little recorder, and then if someone has one, I can plug it in and talk into it and just hear it.
Yeah.
But of course, now I have the RE20. I don't really have to worry about the PR40.
That's a great mic.
Yeah, it's a great. Yeah, they're both great. They're all great mics. I mean, really, they're all great mics.
Between the Heil and the mixer, I have a FET head. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Cloud Lifter is another product that's similar. But essentially what you do is you turn on the phantom power, which you wouldn't normally do, into a dynamic mic, and it runs to the FET head, which then provides, I don't know, I forget how much, 20 or 30 dB of really clean gain, and then onto the Heil. And I did that because when I was trying to sort of eliminate background hiss, when you have a microphone like the Heil and some of the others that are not very efficient, you've got to turn the preamp on the mixer up pretty high.
Right.
This way, I spent $100 or whatever it was for this FET head. It provides the clean gain, and I can turn the gain, the preamp on the mixer down really, really low, where it's got no noise of its own. So I know for me, it was like a cleaner way to get a way to get a cleaner signal, I should say, into the mixer.
Right, that's great. I remember in the pre-show email you sent me that you used that, and I was like, I didn't know what it was, but that's a great idea. I haven't tried that. I'd be interested in trying that, like doing a little A/B test where you put your mic into you put your mic straight into the mixer and you crank the preamp in the mixer and you record something, and then put the FET head in the chain and turn down the preamp on the mixer, and then record it at the same level, and then check the background noise, like
Yes.
scan it for a noise print and see the difference.
I think the better your mixer preamps are, the less you need to use a FET head or a cloud lifter. I'm using a Behringer mixer. I've had this for 6 years now. It's like daily use because it's sort of my entertainment system too. I've got tablets connected to it, and speakers, and all this stuff.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
we talked about man cave before. It's kind of my little, audio, video entertainment system all wrapped around this mixer.
It's on the ironing board.
On the ironing board.
So, all right. So the mixer itself, how many what describe the mixer?
So it's a 1204 analog, and it accepts 4 microphone inputs and a couple other channels for the usual stereo inputs. I connect it to the computer with I have a little USB interface, a little Behringer UCA interface. It's a little, I don't know, they go for like $35, and it's just a audio or analog rather to digital converter. So
right.
I did that again. It's because I'm looking to reduce background noise and stuff. I almost never use noise reduction in software. I like to do whatever I can to make the signal really clean from the beginning. So my theory here was that laptops are incredibly electrically noisy inside. I mean, you've got all these components, all this stuff that generates RF and everything, all packed together. And so instead of using the computer's sound card, I spent $35 for one of these little UCA sound cards, external sound cards, basically, and do the analog to digital conversion outside of the computer, and it just feeds it into the USB port.
Right, that's great, and that's a $35. That's pretty cheap. It works pretty good though.
It's great. They may be $40 now, but
got it.
Really cheap. I have 2 laptops, and I use one for Skype only, and then my other laptop for doing the backup recording in software for the show plan and things that I might do while I'm recording. So I have those separated, and I use those little UCA digital converters for each laptop. I think I have 3 of them in total, so I can just, whenever I need to connect, I want to connect by USB, and I do the conversion outside the computer. That's
great. That's similar to me. I have 4 Focusrite Scarlett 2i2s, I think, or 3.
Yeah.
But
I also have the Scarlett, the Solo, the little one that I use when I'm out traveling, because we do a lot of, my wife and I, we do a lot of traveling, and so we're in hotels a lot, and sometimes I'll take a mixer with me. I have a smaller mixer that I'll take, and sometimes I'll just take that Focusrite and use that if I'm trying to go for sort of minimal equipment on the road. But that works really well.
It's called the Scarlett Solo?
Yeah.
I've seen that before. I haven't tried it though.
Yeah. It's just, it takes one mic or one instrument, and that's it.
Got it.
Otherwise, it does the same thing that the larger ones do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the Focusrite Scarlett Solo.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that. I haven't tried it. That's not cheap though. How much is it? $100? $150?
Yeah, I'd say $100, but you watch for them to go on sale, and you can get them for maybe $20 less.
All right. I love the fact that you run 2 computers and one is Skype only. I think that's, in fact, I just went back and forth with a guy on Facebook. He was having trouble because he was doing everything in one computer. Yeah, and so he had the Skype going on the same computer that he had, let's say, Audacity going. So he was trying to have a call on Skype, trying to record things in Audacity. And the other thing was his mixer was a USB mixer. So it wasn't, there's not even analog, signal chain going into the computer. Like it just, I mean, because then a USB mixer, you need the little piece of software on the computer for that. So now you have 3 major softwares open, and he wasn't able to hear this or do that, or this sounded really bad. And my initial advice was like, just don't use the USB part of your mixer. Just use analog. And the other thing is to either get another computer or a digital recorder, so your Skype computer is only your Skype computer.
Yes. Almost everybody has an old computer, and this Skype computer it's broken. The hinge is broken. If I ever close the lid on this, the screen is going to come off the thing.
Oh, Max, please, you got to give us a picture, man.
Yeah, it's
just
a disaster.
Give me a picture. I won't share it, I swear.
It's running Windows 10. It's propped up with its screen against a little wall over here so that the screen doesn't fall off. And I only run Skype on that. I've taken off everything else, any services that aren't necessary. All that stuff is gone. So it's only Skype. But you know what, Chris? It's even worse than that, because I have 2 ISPs. I have DSL and I have cable.
Oh, my.
And so each of those 2 PCs is running off its own ISP.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Tell me you're not doing that just so your Skype connection has its own clear channel.
Yes. Actually,
really?
Yes.
Oh, that is tremendous.
Several years ago. And you know what? The Skype machine, it's running off the slower DSL, which is actually what we're talking through right now. Several years ago, Skype started giving us fits. I mean, it was dropouts. It was just terrible.
Right.
And I tried everything. And just on a whim, I tried it on DSL, on my DSL line, and that immediately solved the problem. I can't explain why. It sounds better on the slower DSL than it does on the faster cable. So that PC runs DSL. The other one that's got my backup recording going, and all those other things that are associated with podcasts other than Skype is running off the cable DSL, the cable Wi-Fi internet.
Wow.
I don't know if it's because there's a problem with the router in Skype or the modem. I don't know, but it works better on DSL.
That's so interesting. I wonder if you're the only person who does this, has 2 different internet service providers. This is just tremendous.
I've never run across.
I think you can get some real marketing for your show here, Max, and this is how you do it. You get a picture of you sitting next to all your equipment with the ironing board and everything, and you get some press, man. Get some local press there in Connecticut, because somebody will put you in the paper and say, "Look at this guy. He's
Look
crazy.
At this nut
He's
job.
awesome."
I wonder what Barry thinks about this.
What?
I wonder what Barry thinks about all that.
Barry, do you think that Max is a freaking rock star for having DSL and cable?
Oh, forget it.
Yeah. I mean, really, this is tremendous. All right, so now you're recording. The computer you're recording into is one way you're recording it, and then you're also using a digital audio recorder. Which is your main one and which is the backup? Because the way you've been saying it's like the computer's a backup.
Yeah, I always considered the digital audio recorder the primary. It's a Marantz PMD 620, which is really small, really lightweight, and has given me no problems over the years, except the little doors for the where you plug the power in, and for the memory card are kind of flimsy. But otherwise, I love it. I always made that the primary. The software recording, I'm recording into Audacity as the backup. But what I'm doing is I'm taking balanced signals, balanced outputs from the mixer. I'm running them through a CleanBox Pro that converts them to not balanced. Then that goes through one of the then that goes into the recorder. And when I look at the 2 of them, when I compare the 2 recordings, the software in Audacity versus the Marantz, I really don't see any difference. They both seem equally clean.
What is the CleanBox Pro again?
It's like a little transformer, I think. So when I wanted to hook this thing up to make a secondary recording, I didn't really understand the concept of balanced lines at that point. So I plugged them into the balanced outputs of the mixer because that's what was available. And it didn't work. And I couldn't figure out why it didn't work until I discovered that, there's this thing between balanced and unbalanced. They're not the same. This Art Clean Box, I think it's, like I say, it's just a transformer that converts it to unbalanced. And because it's using a transformer in there, there's no physical, connection with the signal. So any noise or anything coming out of the mixer doesn't pass through the chain on up to the to the recorder.
Interesting. What is the input on the Marantz digital recorder? Is it a little 1/8" mini?
Yes.
Okay. But I know I've done that. I've taken, stereo. In fact, I think I'm doing it right now for my digital recorder backup, which is I'm taking 1/4" out of my mixer. But I used to take, XLR left and XLR right out into a cable that basically, so it was two XLRs on one end. The other end was just an 1/8" mini that plugs into my digital recorder, and it worked fine for me. That's interesting that it didn't work.
I don't know what I probably had the wrong cable, the wrong kind of cable, but this little small box took care of the problem.
Right. So just so everyone understands, the difference between balanced and unbalanced is that balanced is like an XLR is balanced because there's a I don't know what they call them. There's 3 different wires. There's a plus, there's a minus, and there's a ground. So that's why there's 3 prongs on an XLR male, right? And three holes in an XLR female. So that's balanced because the ground has its own wire. Unbalanced is only 2 wires. It's the positive, and then it's the negative, but the negative also transports the ground as well. So the negative and the ground are on the same wire.
Right. That's
the technical difference of cables and what they mean by balanced and unbalanced. And balanced are more stable, right? It's usually a cleaner signal. Usually it's not interrupted by or affected by these other noises or RF noises, or even like if an unbalanced cable is near a power cable, and if they're laying parallel or like right next to each other, sometimes you can get some hum from that. So that's why that's another little tip I don't think I've shared in the show. If you're ever running audio cables and power cables near each other, try to keep them away from each other. But if you have to cross at a 90-degree angle.
Right.
So they're not running right next to each other for some distance. Anyway, that's balanced and unbalanced. All right, the ClearBox Pro, that's what you're using there. And you're recording into Audacity. All right, let's get into editing.
Yeah.
What's your general philosophy on editing? Are you a maniac?
Somewhere in between. I'm a maniac when it comes to ending up with each speaker on their own track, because I'd like to do that. So I'll even divide it out. If I have one track that's got 2 people on it, or let's say the guest has got their voice, but also everybody else on Skype on it, I'll edit that so that it's just the guest. But as far as actual editing for perfection, I think I've eased off some from where I started, but there's kind of an art to it, I think, because you can really, really change what the speaker is projecting based on how you edit it. I mean, if someone is, let's see, well, they're kind of thinking about something before they answer, you may not want to edit all that out. You can edit it out and they sound like, snap. They had the answer right away. This guy knew it. But sometimes the way the conversation is going, it's clear that, or you want it to be clear that you're sort of challenging them a little bit in terms of their thinking, and you want to keep that in there. So when they say, that projects something different than if someone just kind of goes from sentence to sentence and nothing is in between. So I kind of try to retain the flavor of the conversation without misrepresenting the speaker. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I was just thinking the other day that some of the ums you have to leave in there because they're spacers. Like, so if someone ends a sentence and they end the sentence, period. So and then they continue. It's hard giving examples while you're talking.
I know it is. Yeah.
But yeah, so some ums actually serve a purpose, and if you cut out that it tightens it so much that it's unnatural. So I 100% agree. What I want to ask you about is what you said before that, where you said if you have two people on one track, you'll actually take the time to separate them into two tracks?
Yeah. I'll do that for the guest. Now, most of the co-hosts are giving me recordings from their end, right? We're doing big multi-enders. But if the guest is going to be on the same track with everybody else on Skype, and usually I'll separate the guest out. So I have just a recording, just a track with the guest, because then I can equalize that as it needs to be. Also, the levels. Skype does a lot of compression, but sometimes the levels of the different participants on the call can be quite different, particularly if the guest is on a phone, which we try to avoid. But if they're on a cell phone or on a landline, a lot of times I find the level in Skype is not the same for them. So I want to equalize that. I want to level that in a different way. So yeah, it's kind of fanatical, but
no. That's great, though. I mean, look, if you're really doing it right, that's what you do. So I applaud you, sir. All right, so let's talk about monitors. How are you listening when you're editing and when you're mastering and finalizing it?
I used to listen with headphones and occasionally with earbuds, just to try to listen to it the way our audience is going to listen to it. But about a year or so ago, I picked up a Yamaha monitor, and mostly when I'm editing and mixing, I listen through the monitor.
Okay, just one speaker?
Yeah, one speaker, mono.
Nice. Oh, mono.
I'm a mono guy, let me tell you.
Dude, this is awesome. I just heard Mark Maron's interview on WTF with Neil Young, and They were talking about how mono is so awesome because there's a depth, and of course they're talking about music, but yeah. Still, mono is that's awesome. You have one speaker. What kind of Yamaha speaker do you know?
It's a HS5, I think. So it's a little 5-inch cone and a tweeter, two-way monitor.
Nice.
It sounds pretty good. I got it on sale, at Guitar Center.
What made you switch from headphones to that?
I listened to my podcast, or to one of my shows, in my car. And my car apparently came with this ridiculously huge subwoofer under the driver's seat. I know. It's like, those guys that drive down the street with the thing booming. I can do that if I want to, which I don't. I definitely don't. But anyway, when I started listening to, I didn't like the response. I mean, this is like way bass heavy. It's like, this is not right. I mean, if I'm listening to certain music, okay, but not for this. So I started thinking about, I need to be able to listen. I was thinking headphones, with some better headphones maybe that would kind of indicate this to me. But, in the process of thinking about this, I said, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to find something that's just neutral, something with a really, a flat frequency response.
Right.
And if some Yahoo's got some giant subwoofer in their car, then if they want to listen to me, they're going to have to turn their bass down, because I'm going to equalize it to, kind of flat, kind of, normal. If you've got, crappy earbuds that have absolutely no bass, well, then you either have to buy better earbuds if you want to hear me the way I hear me, or, you got to listen to it the way that it comes through your crappy earbuds.
Right.
I don't know if that's a great philosophy, because before my logic was, no, listen to it using the devices that your audience is going to listen to and make it sound good for that. Then I switched and I said, well, I'm just going to go for flat. and it's up to the user, to the listener, to adjust on their end. That may not be a smart philosophy, but that's where I am.
No, it is. That's the proper way to do it as an audio engineer. You need to make it sound good everywhere and not be too bass heavy. This is one of the biggest problems in podcasting, that sound wise, is this low end. Yeah. People don't roll off the low end, and you don't, on a kick drum or a bass guitar, you need low end. On someone's voice on a podcast, you don't need that kind of low end. So I always, if you're EQing your voices, if you're listening to this, check your filters, check the low end filter. You may want to roll off a lot. I do. I roll off almost every voice that I EQ for when I produce podcasts for everybody. Maybe, and it's always different. Sometimes I roll off from 40 hertz down, sometimes from 80 hertz down. Sometimes I go up to 100 hertz down. It depends on the signal. But yeah, like you said, these big systems, consumer audio, that's what they do. They add high end and low end to make it sound better. But if you, on the production side, if you already added too much low end and too much high end, then when it gets to the consumer, it's going to be like no mid range.
Yeah,
and in audio, they say when you mix audio music, the mid range is what's important. If your mid range is a good mix, then it'll sound good everywhere. So of course you have to control the low end. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I generally roll off myself around 80 hertz.
Yeah, and you might even be able to roll off more, but you know what? But I'm so happy to hear that you went in the car and you're listening and you looked up what kind of monitor can I get that has a flat response, because Yamahas are. I use Yamaha NS10s. These are standard music studio speakers, near field monitors. They're small.
Yes, yeah, near field.
Yeah, they're 6-inch woofers and then the tweeter, whatever. But they're flat. They don't have a lot of low end. And when you first listen to them, you're like, where's the low end? But you got to get used to them because it's pretty flat. So if you mix it and it sounds good there, you can take it anywhere. Look, like you said, people have earbuds that have no bass response, but they're used to that. They listen to everything on that. Yeah. So yours isn't going to sound any different from anybody else's. So that's, as an audio engineer, that's what you want. You want to have your mix be good and tight everywhere. And so, great job, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, that monitor sits probably 3 feet from my face, so it's pretty close.
That's great. So the last thing I want to ask you about is the mastering. You said you do that within the Hindenburg Journalist software. By the way, is that software available to anyone? And how much is it? Yes.
Well, there's two versions. There's the the Pro version, which I use, which is, I forget what. It's about, $300, $325, something like that. But it's not a recurring and it's not a monthly kind of thing like some other DAWs do. But there's also a simpler version that's, I think it's around $100. It's actually what I started with. And the Pro version adds some interesting things like this voice profiling. It does loudness loudness export, so I can have it export the wave file at minus 16 LUFS since I'm doing mono.
Nice.
It's got that voice profiler kind of thing. So yeah, I mean the Pro version, it's kind of an investment, but it's like anything else, if you want good quality that's going to last for a while. And their support is, it sounds like a commercial, but their support is really amazing. A couple of years ago, I had a really peculiar bug that was causing a problem, and I talked to the developer about it, and he discovered the source of the bug, and he said that in the next release he'll have that fixed. But for you, in the meantime, here's a secret in between release just for you that will fix the problem for you right away. I thought, wow, that's support.
Right?
So it's a really different thing. Hindenburg Journalist it's sort of based on a different model. The model is, here's the journalist part, is that if you're a reporter or something out in the field, you're making a recording, you need to send that in to the to the studios. whatever. I mean, think NPR, something like that. You want to be able to do some basic editing out in the field, get it to the proper loudness level that meets whatever the standards that your studio, your organization is using, and get it off. So it does accept plugins. So if you really want to do a lot of different stuff, you can add those in. But it's normally kind of focused around equalization, loudness leveling, compression, things like that. I do use a plugin. I use that Spitfish plugin for de-essing when I need that. But otherwise, I don't really use other plugins. I could if I thought I needed to, but I just don't at this point.
So how much do you compress an EQ in the mastering phase within Hindenburg? How much do you compress an EQ, if at all?
Compression, I would say light. Now, the way the compression works is it's a knob, so it's a single setting. You're not setting each of the parameters for compression. And so on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm up about 4.
Okay.
On the compression. Sometimes if one of the tracks, and I do that as a master track. So you can create a master track, and you can global equalization. That's where I'll do a roll off usually, global compression. But you can also do it on a track by track basis. And so if I have one particular track that is like all over the map, I might apply a little additional compression just to that track. I don't know if that's wise to do kind of one track and then more compression at a master level. It's sort of compressing, but I try to keep it kind of light.
Yeah, exactly. If you compress it a little bit here and a little bit there, it's fine. But if you're smashing it somewhere, just destroying it on one of them, of course that's not good.
Right.
I do that. I do that as well. In fact, now sometimes when I mix down the rough mix or the mix of an episode, I'll use compression on every voice, but then once I get to the final, add the bumper music and add the commercials and add the outro, and there's one track with the final mix on it, sometimes that final mix, I'll be like, oh, it needs to be a little brighter, so I'll just add a little EQ, or I don't usually compress. Sometimes I will de-ess at that point as well. If one of the voices if the S's are still piercing, I'll use a de-esser. Yeah, but like you said, as long as you're doing it light and just doing what's necessary and no more, then you're fine. Absolutely.
Yeah, good.
Well, this has been great, Max. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I mean, what you've shared is so helpful to everybody and to me. I mean, I've learned a lot as well. I'm happy to have you as a guest, and people can find you at the Airplane Geeks Podcast, and the website is airplanegeeks.com, right?
That's right, Chris. Thanks so much. It's been a real blast, a lot of fun. And like I said before, I'm really enjoying what you're doing. Look forward to a lot more of it, and the school opening up in the fall, right?
Yeah, the school's going to be awesome. By the way, did you ever fly a plane with a banner behind it that says, listen to my Airplane Geeks podcast?
Not yet, but that's a great idea.
Come on. Do you have drones, Max?
Yes.
You do?
I do.
Okay.
But it turns out I'm a really bad drone pilot.
Uh-oh.
It's that whole problem of, when the thing is going away from you, it's easy, but when it's coming back to you, then the controls are reversed, and I always have problems with that.
That's crazy. I
crash a lot.
Wow. See, I would do the same thing. Like when it's facing one way, you can do it. When there's a game, I think that app Lumosity, that like mind games to strengthen your mind.
Yes.
There's one like that, or something somewhere where it changes your orientation and it just completely messes you up. I don't know who can do that. Right? That's why you should always, I guess if you're flying in that sense, you should have like a little camera on the drone. So you just look where you're going and you can go left and right from where you're going instead of looking at the drone coming at you and trying to figure out left and right, right?
Right. That's called first-person view, FPV. If you're wearing goggles and viewing it from the perspective of the drone through its camera. That's a different kind of flying. Yeah, that works really well.
Well, there you go. This has been completely awesome. Thank you, Max. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been wonderful. Check out all our previous episodes at podcastengineeringschool.com. We'll be back next week. And, of course, until then, You know what to do. Barry, you know what to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He knows what to do. Barry, you ready to go? You ready for the show to end?
No way. You crazy?
All right, he doesn't want the show to end, but it has to end. So take care, everybody, and sound great.
Should